Hey guys, I'm still learning how to use this camera, so if anybody has any tips, this is the Sony, I don't even know what it is. It's like the vlogging camera that everybody uses, and you'll see in this video that it is going in and out of focus a lot. So I totally understand if you just want to listen and not watch, because it's really, it could be annoying for some of you. The content I think is really good, which is why I'm still posting it. But I'm still learning how to use this camera. So if anybody has any tips, I'm gonna post on Reddit and try to figure out why it does that. Because I was holding the camera and it's kind of a selfie stick and I was being relatively still. So I don't know what was causing that in and out of focus thing, but I'll figure it out. Enjoy.
It's been probably 10 days since I last recorded. It's gonna take me a while to get into the habit of recording these videos. And I think it has a lot to do not with making the videos themselves, but I overthink it. I have these limiting beliefs, I think, these unconscious programs in the back of my mind that it's going to be too hard. And I think that's kind of an unconscious program I've had for a long time. Even when I first started my business, I had a multi-million-dollar business that I almost didn't start because I thought it was not going to work out, right? How many of us have had that thought for forever? Like, oh, why bother? I'm just gonna quit anyway, right? But with that business, I started it back in 2014. I'm coming up on the 9-year anniversary in November of starting a business, a blog, back when blogs were a thing. They still are, but they're so spammy these days, and I feel like people are on TikTok, they're on YouTube, way more than they're looking on blogs, although I have read my share of blog posts about a lot of things, because I'm a reader, but I also love Reddit. I feel like Reddit's becoming a search engine now, too. Coming up on the 9-year anniversary of starting a blog that would change my life forever. And if you told me 9 years ago that I would be in a van outside of a $2 million house that I am about to move out of, that I have moved out of essentially, I would think you were crazy. And also, if you had told me 9 years ago that I would have been thought of as crazy and that I would have been in the mental hospital 4 times between 2018 and 2020, that I would have been diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses, that I would have healed myself from those illnesses, and now would be talking to you about that kind of stuff on video on YouTube, I would have thought you were crazy. It's just, but my life has become normal for me, and sometimes it helps to have an outside perspective. So as much as I'm a little bit afraid of the kind of comments I'm gonna get on my videos, because of the stuff that I've already seen on TikTok, like there's some really toxic people on TikTok. I end up just blocking the toxicity. Like, you cannot explain to somebody who believes that they are mentally ill that they can decide not to be mentally ill and heal themselves. Like, they want to believe that there's no cure. They will not believe that there is a way out of mental illness unless science comes up with evidence. But the thing that they don't realize is that science will never come up with any evidence that there's a way out, because there's so much money in science, right? So-called science is actually big pharma. It's the medical industrial complex. That's one reason I think I'll always be grateful for the experiences I had as a so-called mentally ill person, going through burnout, going through divorce, just massive emotional betrayal and trauma, is I didn't understand any of that stuff before. I had never gotten caught in those crossfires. I'd never experienced it. I'd always had a pretty, I wouldn't say dull life, but uneventful life in terms of getting wrapped up in those sorts of industries. I feel like, so it's after 10 o'clock at night, and so if somebody's watching this and they're thinking, oh, your pupils are large, you probably are manic right now. Like, no, I'm not. It's 10 o'clock at night, I'm in a van in my driveway, and I'm perfectly sane. I didn't take my meds today because I'm currently not prescribed any meds today. I'm not prescribed any meds at all. I mean, technically, I was prescribed Adderall 2 years ago and Xanax 3 years ago. And I was prescribed like 13 other medications within the last 4 years. But I am taking none of them by choice because I chose to detox instead. Because I realized that, hey, if you're going through burnout, if you're going through trauma, and your brain is working so hard trying to process all this stuff, it can literally damage it. And I found out that I did have brain damage, that my brain was inflamed, claimed that I had multiple different viruses and bacteria at work that were creating neurotoxins, getting into my brain, making it hard to concentrate, making my life very difficult, making it hard to function, and that these things are symptoms of underlying causes that the medical industry is never going to tell you because they can't sell you a cure. I mean, they're not selling you cures anyway. They're selling you management. They're selling you a treatment because they want you to be a recurring customer. That's the model. That doesn't mean like the doctors are all these sinister people that are out up to no good, right? They're simply indoctrinated. They are indoctrinated into a system, into a complex. Right? It's the medical schools in bed with Big Pharma. The professors are paid by Big Pharma to promote certain drugs as the treatments for illnesses. And in the case of psychiatry, they are the professors. I have like an eyewitness account of this on my podcast. An actual psychiatrist was like, I got invited to lunch and learns by drug companies when I was a medical student, and my professors were teaching me how to prescribe specific drug names that I will not mention on purpose, but if you go to the Misdiagnosed podcast, I'll link it in the description box. The podcast episode where I'm talking to an actual psychiatrist who was recounting her medical school experience and being indoctrinated by these professors who are paid by pharma companies to promote their drugs very, very subtly as treatments for the mental illnesses that they are simply memorizing. They're memorizing from the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which was invented in order to give psychiatrists and other professionals a way to diagnose so they could be paid. That is it. It was easier to work with insurance companies if they had a logbook, not a logbook, but more like a dictionary of terminology of diagnoses. It doesn't address treatment in that book. That's what they learn in medical school is treatment, and all of that is sponsored by the medical industrial complex, large part, Big Pharma. That is how they learn. Then unwittingly, people like me and you go into their offices, or in many cases, we are forced into their offices. I never voluntarily went to a psychiatrist except for the one at Amen Clinics because I believe they were different, and in many ways they are. Would I go back? Probably not. Maybe just out of curiosity to see what my brain looks like on the SPECT scan now after 3 years. 2.5 years, but it's like $2,500 to get another scan. I'm just like, like that would pay for a lot of diesel fuel for my van, you know? I'm not motivated. I'm not motivated. Anyway, so we go to the psychiatrist and we're telling them what our symptoms are, and they are simply saying, oh, I learned about this in medical school. Like, this is symptoms of major depressive disorder, symptoms of bipolar 1, symptoms of bipolar 2. They don't quite match the description of bipolar 1 or 2, so we're going to just still diagnose them with bipolar, but it's bipolar unspecified. They're shifting bipolar diagnoses to a spectrum now. They have generalized anxiety disorder. Like, all of these symptoms have an underlying physiological cause that has to do with toxicity in the brain, or your brain doesn't have enough of a critical resource, like mineral salts, something that hydrates your brain, right? Neurotransmitters, many of which come from other systems, like the adrenal glands, the liver. So your endocrine system, like all of that stuff is integrated. It's an integrated system. It's not just the brain. So it's not the whole BS about a chemical imbalance is only true in the sense that the chemical imbalance is a physiological imbalance due to toxicity or a deficiency in the brain that originates from a system connected to the brain, because all the systems are connected, right? Your brain isn't an island. Your liver is not an island. Your adrenal glands are not islands. Your thyroid is not an island. Everything is producing and creating and absorbing things that depend on another system. It's a very interdependent system of organs. But our medical model is called the Cartesian medical model, based off of Descartes, Rene Descartes. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. Where if your knee hurts, you go to the knee doctor. If your foot hurts, you go to the foot doctor. If your heart has a problem, you go to the heart doctor. And they don't communicate well between each other. And from that same experience, I was also diagnosed with a blood cancer, where they told me that my bone marrow is just malfunctioning because of some gene, and they put me through genetic testing and all this stuff, and they told me I had essential thrombocythemia, which is related to leukemia and lymphoma, like in that family of disorders, blood cancers. And I went through like a bone marrow biopsy to confirm it. And then I was prescribed chemo pills, and I was like, no, like I'm 30, at the time 34, and I'm not going to go on chemotherapy pills to lower my immune system. And this was before I was aware that I had any like virus stuff going on that was already impacting my immune system. Not aware of that. They weren't testing for any of that either. It was just assumed that because I didn't have any like classic symptoms that they identified related to Epstein-Barr, like mono, that I didn't have it, which is just bullshit. But they don't know what they don't know. They literally believe that they know all there is to know to be able to make a logical like conclusion to help me manage this illness that I will have for the rest of my life. They don't understand that it's an inflammatory response to something else. So anyway, I refused the chemo pills, and I said I don't believe that I'm at risk as a near vegan. At the time, I was jumping on my trampoline, which is amazing for your lymphatic system, amazing to prevent blood clots. That was the major risk that they were worried about, is blood clots. I didn't take the COVID vaccine, which would have put me at a much more higher risk as immunocompromised, because chemo pills are an immunosuppressant. Like, it probably would have killed me if I gotten the vaccination. So I'm glad I didn't. Anyway, so not taking the chemo pills, I was like, at the time I was like, I'm never going back to this guy. But then when I figured out the stuff that I learned from Medical Medium and started detoxing my brain and seeing the symptoms go away within several months, like my gut problems were gone. My mind started to clear up. I didn't need or feel the need to take Adderall. I didn't feel the need to take any Xanax at night. I was replenishing the storehouse of my body and replenishing the critical resources that a brain needs to function optimally. I was getting out the toxic heavy metals. I was taking out the toxic ingredients in the foods that I was eating. I wasn't eating genetically modified food that was not recognized by my body. I was being more conscious of like the fragrances. I got rid of all my perfumes, even my Burberry. I liked them, but they are not good for the brain. They're not. And I chose my brain over that stuff, which was hard. Like, if you told like 15, even 20-year-old, 25-year-old me that I would have ever stopped wearing perfume, I would have been like, yeah, right, whatever, get out of here. But I did. And all of it matters. All of that stuff gets into our brains. It gets into our bodies, and it's all the same system, right? The brain is the motherboard of everything. It doesn't exist like in a vacuum by itself or on an island. It helps everything operate, and the nervous system is all connected to that too. So there's a lot of nerve disorders. I just look lovely. I'm looking at the screen that I see myself on, and it's just like, but I'm just being real. I'm being real, and that's the decision that I made when I said I was going to make these videos. Is I was going to show up as I am. Don't care. Like, I'm wearing a hummingbird t-shirt and these Walmart pants. They're 100% cotton pants that I found at Walmart, but they are not pretty. I'm going to show you what pants I have on. They're very comfortable though. They're like these gauzy cotton, maybe the stuff that mummies were wrapped in. Anyway, but I made a promise to myself that I was going to be real in these videos, and I think it took me a while to remember that, because it's so easy to fall back into those old thought patterns of like, oh, I have to look a certain way, or the van has to be in better shape, it has to be clean, and it has to be all set up. Like, I'm going to show you what my van looks like right now. I'm going to flip the screen so I can see what I'm showing you, but I mean, it's pretty clean. I've just got like kind of stuff everywhere, but I haven't done like an official van tour yet, because I'll do it when I'm good and ready. And I wanted this channel to be about, I might change the name away from Not Another Van Vlog. My TikTok already changed it back from Not Another Van Vlog to The Kate Awakening, because I just feel like it's going to be more about my story. And my story is one that I think is meant to help a lot of people. That's the only reason I went through what I went through, is because I'm supposed to share it with other people. And the van stuff is just like a side. It's like my experience, especially recovering from mental illness, even despite being told it wasn't recoverable, is the entree. And van life, you know, me moving out of a mansion into a van, and how I got to that, and like my business background, and like building a business and selling the business, and all the emotional ups and downs of that, all of that, side dishes. It's like I was overthinking it. Like, oh, it needed to be like everybody else's van vlog, or that's why I originally called it Not Another Van Vlog, because when I think about what I want the channel to be, I want it to be something that comes easily to me. And just talking about what's actually going on in my life seems to fascinate people when I just, like, take the filter off, right? With that false belief, that limiting belief that nobody cares what you have to say. How many of you watching right now have ever thought that? Oh, nobody cares what I have to say. You know, I thought that as I was starting my blog that ended up being sold for millions of dollars 8 years later. Imagine if I had never started, because I thought nobody cared what I had to say, or nobody wanted to learn from me, or that what I had inside of my head, my brain, wasn't valuable. And if I were to allow the stigma of having been in the mental hospital 4 times and having been diagnosed with all these mental illnesses, there is a stigma with that. Or the stigma that I am 36 years old and wear hearing aids. Like, any of those silly things that may cross my mind or have crossed my mind in the past. If I were to let any of that hold me back from creating these videos, I don't know what that would, like, future me would be pissed about that. You know, future me, and then the people that will be impacted and maybe are being impacted by this very video now or in the future would be like, man, I'm glad you posted that video. I'm glad that you didn't listen to those old programming, you know, and there's so much, like, negative messaging in our world, especially, I mean, you know, crazy people, and I'm doing crazy things with my life, and yes, I've been in the mental hospital, and I'll probably say it a million times more and tell stories when I feel good and ready about what it was like in the mental hospital. But I want to tell my real stories. I want to be who I really am on camera, as if you were in the room with me. Like, I'm going to be talking to one person. Like, pretending like this camera is one person. And maybe it's me. That one person is me when I was sitting on the couch depressed and really wanting to die. Maybe that's the one person I'm talking to right now. Like, somebody I needed to hear. Something I needed to hear. Because I can remember talking to everybody. Talking to nobody, but then when I would talk to somebody, like, not wanting to talk to anybody, right? Because I was so freaking depressed. But still desperate to figure out what to do about it. Like, just trying to describe with my limited ability, limited words, right? Because this was such a foreign experience for me as a generally very happy and perky, capable person most of my life, to somebody who felt like completely and utterly flat and dead inside. Trying to describe that to someone who had no idea, no idea what that was like, and not knowing if anybody was ever going to understand what it was like, and to know what to do about it, and to have this sinking feeling, like, time after time, of hearing someone say, oh, you just have to forgive yourself, and, you know, you just have to reparent your inner child, and both, like, all those things were true. But if your brain, again, is not functioning properly, and you're having all of these, like, obsessive compulsive thought disorder type paranoia, guilt, like the obsessive guilty thoughts, religious persecution, derealization, depersonalization, stuff that you believe is, like, stuff that you were, like, I even was afraid to tell people because I didn't want to end up back in the mental hospital. And I think, if I'm really being honest, the main reason I went to Amsterdam, I lived in Amsterdam for 6 months, is because they don't put people in mental hospitals. Like, you have to be like a very, very extreme case, but it seems so flippant in the United States. The 4 times that it happened, like, oh, like, this person's not acting themselves, let's put them in the fucking emergency room and leave them there. Like, that's not going to cause extreme trauma. Like, extreme trauma and stress, and which is the reason why they were experiencing the symptoms in the first place, was because they were under a lot of stress and trauma. Trauma is just an extreme form of stress, which is really taxing to the brain and its resources, and the adrenal glands and its resources, your whole body and its resources. Plus, if they're not feeding you in the mental hospital very well, if you're having to sit in the mental hospital waiting room by yourself for 3 hours without any water, and, like, being repeatedly denied access to water because the water machine is broken, allegedly. Things like that cause more symptoms over time. It's not anything wrong with you as a person. I know I'm speaking the language of somebody out there, and so you might be watching this and be like, this person is not for me. That's fine. Scroll on by. Everybody speaks the language that somebody else can understand and needs to hear the words for, and I think that's something I've always been good at, is explaining seemingly complex ideas in ways that like my previous self could understand. Like I remember being the person who could not understand why anybody would ever want to kill themselves, and like didn't have an accurate or a very expanded concept or awareness or consciousness around mental illness. I was just kind of believing the BS and thought, oh, well, you just go to a psychiatrist or a therapist, or, you know, these conventional ideas. And the mainstream stuff, I believed all of that. I believed it all, but then I found myself caught in it, and I realized, like, none of that's going to work. And I saw it for more of what it was when I was in it. And so now I can come back and look back on those experiences and share about them openly without shame. Like, I don't feel any shame about it. I know that I went through it for a reason. I know what caused the symptoms because I've been able to address those causes and resolve the symptoms. It's not anecdotal evidence. I mean, I guess in the scientific way of explaining things, yeah, it's anecdotal evidence, but that still counts. Because I know I'm not alone. There's many other people in the world that have recovered from mental illness, but they don't get spotlight because they're not studying that, right? They're not studying the natural remedies. And if you think about it, like, that's the logic. Healing naturally is logical. Like, we're meant to be able to heal. But if you interject that ability or interrupt that process with a synthetic substance, which is what these psychiatric drugs are, that Big Pharma is making billions of dollars on a year. Billions, like 10 figures, billions. You're not going to heal because a synthetic substance is like throwing a wrench in the system that we are. Like the biological supercomputers that we are, like it's just like a foreign presence there constantly. It's not going to heal the symptoms. It's only covering up the symptoms. So that's management of the mental illness, like management of the bipolar symptoms, management of the depression. It just makes it easier to deal with. So it gives you the illusion that you're being treated, the illusion that your mental illness is stable, like your mental health is stable. But it's really just causing imbalance, maintaining imbalance. It's not really solving anything. So, yeah, I'm in a van in my driveway. This is what's going on in my mind right now. So we'll talk more about van stuff in the next video. Maybe. Leave me a comment. Let me know you're listening. Let me know what you want to learn about, what you want to hear about, what questions you have. It gives me some inspiration for new videos. Bye.